Welcome to another episode of my Wake Up Call. This is that podcast where I find out a little bit about my guests, and then I want to find out a lot more on the podcast because they're all up to all good. We select people who are fighting a valiant and challenging fight to some of the people who are up to no good. And Terri Cole is going to teach us a lot, and you'll understand why when I get into a little bit of an introduction. She's a licensed psychotherapist. She's a global relationship and empowerment expert. And she's the author of Boundary Boss, the essential guide to talk true, be seen, and finally live free. Well, I can see the connection between boundaries and living free because you don't have boundaries, you're a prisoner. For over 2 decades, she's worked with diverse groups of clients that include everyone from stay-at-home moms to celebrities and Fortune 500 CEOs. She has that gift for making complex psychological concepts accessible and actionable so that clients and students achieve sustainable change. And she's inspired over 450,000 people weekly through her blogs, her social media platform, her signature courses, and her popular podcast, The Terri Cole Show. And you can find out more at terricole.com, and we'll direct you to that at the end. So, Terri, it's great to spend some time with you.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
So I will tee it up the way I always tee it up, which is if you were to think about what matters most to you in life, and you think, I think that'll still matter to me at the end of my life. And there's a quote that I often use. I had a mentor named Warren Bennis, a big leadership guy. He stole the quote from Saul Bellow, and it was, be a first-class noticer. Because when you notice, it's different than looking, watching, and seeing. So growing up, childhood influences, what did you notice that called out to you and then took form and then sent you down the path that you took?
I think I always noticed how other people felt. I always noticed if someone was in pain, even as a little kid. I remember being maybe 4 years old in my neighborhood, and there was an older girl who was maybe 7, and people had been bullying her. And I remember going up to her and saying, walk with me. I was 4. And I was saying, walk with me. And I was saying, they're being mean, but maybe they're in pain. Like I literally was having some kind of an esoteric conversation at that age, but I'm such a super empath that I didn't know that I was feeling other people's feelings, but I was always drawn to help others.
So continue that path a little bit past 4, and so our listeners and I can see you with some of the early influences and how that shaped you.
I think that probably the earliest influence for me was having a very attuned mother. So I was my mother's 4th pregnancy in 6 years. I was going to be her 4th cesarean section. At this time, I was born in the 60s. They didn't think she could carry me to term. They thought that she should end the pregnancy. She was like, no. And here I am. But there was all of these experiences in my life that always made me feel very wanted and very special. And my mother was a very attuned and loving mom. And it's not like I had the perfect upbringing, but I always felt, I can remember being maybe 2, very small. And my mother would bend all the way down and be like, you that's itchy. You don't want to wear that sweater. You don't have to wear it. Like, you want that. You don't like that. And what she taught me in her love and in her attention, right? Her attention that she gave to me and my sisters too, but was that what I thought and how I felt and what I wanted mattered, that I mattered and that I could do good in the world. Another expectation for my mother is that I would do good in the world, and that she was, she wasn't super religious, but, church-going person. And her whole method, she did a lot of volunteer work throughout my life, but she would say, if you can help, you must. And so that, as a little kid, that you're always looking for someone in need. So throughout my life, that was sort of a guiding principle. And I went on to get involved. I became a talent agent. Like my first sort of big career was as a talent agent. And I was, negotiating contracts for supermodels and celebrities. And it was a very sparkly career, I would say. Yet the parallel process that was happening at that time is that I got into therapy very young. I got into therapy when I was 19, and I stopped drinking alcohol when I was 21. And that really changed my life. And it also changed my family system, because there was a lot of alcoholism within my family of origin and my extended family. And to be the cycle breaker there was lucky for me. I was the chosen one. So it wasn't as bad as it would have been had I been the scapegoat, but it was still rough, because my family didn't really understand anything about addiction. I mean, neither did I, obviously, but I had a therapist who was like, what you're describing is alcoholic behavior. And I was like, wait, me? Like I literally I was a senior in college. And I said to her, well, then everyone I know is an alcoholic. And she was like, that may be so, but I'm not treating everyone you know. I'm just treating you. And if you don't go seek help with a 12-step program, I will terminate working with you. I was like, holy crap. Can she even do that? Is my therapist breaking up with me? But it made me know that she thought it was very serious. And so that changed my life. I did go to a 12-step program and realized I'll quickly veer off. I don't know if this is helpful or not, but this was a very impactful moment in my life. So I'm in the basement of a church in Syosset, Long Island, sitting close to the door. It was the 80s, people. So I was smoking my long cigarettes, and because everyone was. And I didn't know anything about 12-step programs or recovery. So I wanted to be near the door in case it was like some weird cult so I could leave. And this woman, and it was the 80s. So you're not looking at me, but you can imagine huge, big hair, like tons of makeup, crazy long nails, everything. We were all wearing neons and shoulder pads and our t-shirts. I don't even know why, but we were. And there was a woman who was similarly shellacked to the way that I was. She was about 10 years older than me. I thought she was very pretty. And so she came over and she was like, are you new here? And I was like, I am. And she said, what brings you? And I just told the truth, because I didn't have a reaching bottom story necessarily. I just said, I have a therapist who said if I didn't come to at least one 12-step program, she was going to break up with me. And she was like, oh, okay. And then to be polite, I said, what brought you here? And she said, I killed a 6-year-old boy in a drunk driving accident. And that changed my life, because it could have been me. And I was so moved by her generosity. She could have said anything. And I remember just holding it together long enough till I could get out of that meeting and get into my car. And I started bawling I was just crying hysterically, a combination of relief that it wasn't me. This was the 80s. I have to say, I cannot count the number of times I drove intoxicated. And we all did. That doesn't make it okay, obviously, but it was a different time. And I was driving back to campus once I pulled it together enough. And I remember just it's like I made this pact with the powers that be, that like, it doesn't have to be me. I get it. And I'm done. And I stopped drinking. And I had 3 months left of my senior year in college. So that changed my life and changed the trajectory of my life, I imagine, because I think I would have gotten it together eventually. I probably would have spent 10 years making bad decisions, or just not feeling my feelings, just being lost, just blaming, just lighting a bunch of fires and wondering why there's so many fires in my life, not knowing I was the pyro. Like, I see this with my clients, where the distraction that this type of disordered relationship with drugs or alcohol creates, we can never get to the original injuries, because we're so busy It's like, it almost feels like you become 911 when you're a therapist, if someone is in active addiction, where you're like, this is just another emergency. We're just going to put out another fire, but you don't really get to the original injury. So I think that if I hadn't stopped then, I think I eventually would have, but I'm really, really grateful for that therapist who was slightly dramatic, but it worked for me. And that now I was eyes wide open in my young life in a way that I hadn't been. And when you drink heavily in your teen years, which I did, there's a little bit of an arrested development when it comes to your problem solving abilities and skill set, because I was using alcohol to numb. So now I was really feeling everything. And I was like, wow, this is amazing and terrifying simultaneously. But that sort of pivoted me towards a different direction. And I ended up in this career, which is so interesting, being a talent agent for these famous people and fancy people, where I didn't drink, I didn't do drugs, I didn't really like going out, I didn't want to go to fashion shows. I'm like, how did I end up here? I ended up always hiring assistants who were young and fancy free and liked to party, because I would drive by the parties I had to go to, and then I would be like, now you stay so I can go home. But I learned a lot. Like, the other parallel process happening was my own therapy in my 20s while I was in this career, and just getting so much more clarity about my pain points. What were the repeated, it's just like this repeating reality, I call it, where you end up in these wrong relationships, or I ended up feeling like used or abused or taken advantage of by people. I had a lot of resentment towards people. I felt like people owed me a little bit. And I didn't realize until years into therapy that had to do with my disordered boundaries, and that my boundaries were too porous, meaning too malleable. And so I was looking out and blaming, like, you bad boyfriend did this to me, or you boss who's quote unquote making me work 15 hours a day, or whatever the complaint was. Through the process of even understanding what boundaries are, that also started this shift. And it also had me change what I wanted to do for a living. Because as much as I was at the height of my success and career, making a lot of money, I was running a bicoastal talent agency, but I was based in New York. I wasn't happy. I was really only interested in the mental health of my clients. And I got to a point where all I was doing was getting people into drug treatment clinics, therapy, eating disorder clinics. Like, I was attuned to the pain that my clients were in. And I did not care about the movie deal or the Pantene deal. And I was like, I need to switch careers until I because I might start to get bad at this soon. And no one in my life understood why I would be quitting that job to become a clinical social worker, basically. I remember my father said, sounds weird. Literally, he's like, you're quitting your super secure and successful job to get into debt at NYU. And I was like, here's the thing, Dad. Sounds weird to you, because, he worked at AT&T Communications for 35 years. I said, but I'm not happy. And how I feel, what I think, and what I want matters. So I'm willing to take a risk and give up all this money, because I kind of feel like not how you do anything is how you do everything. I don't necessarily believe in that statement fully, but I knew that if there was a way to, whatever success would mean to me, I would just apply myself until that happened. But it was so much more aligned with the original part of this conversation, which is wanting to be of service, wanting to help other people learn how to lessen their own suffering and elevate their own joy. Be self-determined, right? Be the boss of you. And I just saw, certainly in the modeling industry, a lot of not that. I don't know. Am I still answering your question, Mark? I'm not sure if I am.
You've mesmerized me. I am not quite addicted, but I am mesmerized. And you're a wonderful storyteller. And And it's a gift to my listeners and me, just how you're describing it. I think we can all picture it. Very inspiring about how you made that shift and how you were able to pivot from the superficial to what deeply mattered, and then how you were able to see and feel into people's pain and want to do something about it. And so continue on. You're doing just fine. And of course, my listeners and I are going to want to hear more about Boundary Boss, because setting boundaries, what that actually means, is something that a lot of people have trouble with.
So I opened my own practice. I started seeing an epidemic of the same thing that I experienced in my 20s. And now I'm in my 30s. And it didn't matter what presenting problem someone came to my couch with. I could just follow those dots backwards to the lack of this incredibly important skill set of setting, enforcing boundaries. They just didn't know they had a choice, just like I didn't. I would have done it sooner. I didn't know it. And so I just started taking copious notes and just started seeing what are the similarities. And I had a tendency to attract into my private practice women in particular who resonated with who I actually am. So ambitious, highly capable women. And so this was a real point of pain and shame, where most of my clients figured out the success in the same way that I did, right? We can be successful because we would do it at the expense of ourselves. We know how to be successful. We know how to make money, but it's like there's only so long that you can work in that way or do it because you're sort of pleasing all the other people. From the outside, it looks like you've got it all together, but inside, so many of my clients were feeling the way that I was feeling: underappreciated, undervalued, and exhausted. You're just burnt out. Everything becomes like checking a box. Even the things that should be pleasurable or used to be pleasurable become just more duty, right? More things that you must do. And it's exhausting. So this is what inspired me: years of teaching people, mostly women, how to do this in their lives. So I would create meditations, because I'm also a meditation teacher, and I would create exercises, and I would see it over and over. So I'm like, I have to create something so that I can't keep explaining the same thing. So if I would say, hey, I'll send you this exercise that I created and you can do it. So then I started gathering, and I realized in 2015, maybe, I was like, I think I should do a course. I think I should offer this virtually. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if it'll work with a group of people. And I don't know if it'll work if they're not actually in my office and in person. And keep in mind what virtual life was in 2015, pre-pandemic. Very different than now. Now we're all very well aware of how well virtual life and learning and education and all of that. I didn't know. I was like, we're going to see. So I beta tested the course with like 50 women. And I was like, all right, is it working? And people were transforming like a lot. We were seeing changes. And then I did a whole survey with them, like, what is missing? They were like, the course should be twice as long. I'm like, okay, what else? So I took all of the suggestions of what helped the most, what didn't help, which I knew a lot from teaching it to clients for so long, but I really wanted to know with them. And I underestimated the power of the collective experience and what it would be like to teach people, women in particular, to support other women the way that I've always in my life. I know that there's lots of things out there where people say that women are not supportive of other women, or women are jealous, or that has not been my life experience at all. But I have had enough clients to know that it is a very common experience, even though it saddens me. So part of this process with having the course is teaching people how to actually support others not as these high functioning codependents that we were all running around as, which we can also unpack later. Meaning, if someone is in pain in the group and someone else is like, well, this is what you should do. No, none of that. I had these very clear, very boundaried rules of engagement where it was like, you're in this course to keep your eyes on your own paper, to support other people by having faith that they'll figure out their own stuff and you're going to figure out your stuff. So how do we support people? We say, I'm witnessing you with so much compassion. I resonate with what you're sharing. I'm here for you. I see you. This is what real support actually is, because you don't know what someone else should do. And even if you did, it wouldn't help them for you to tell them necessarily. I mean, unless you're their mentor, but in general in life. And I find that with my clients, they just felt part of this process of having disordered boundaries in this way is also having disordered emotional boundaries. So you feel overly responsible for the feeling states and the outcomes and the circumstances and the relationships of other people. So learning how to keep your eye on your own paper, work on yourself, that course. So I've been teaching that course now for 8 years, and thousands of people have gone through the course. And so I guess in 2018 or 2019, I felt like I had it down well enough, because people were asking me to write a book years ago. And I was like, you know what? I'm not writing a book until I can write a book that I think no one else can write. The book that I'm meant, it's not about just being an author for me, right? I knew I would eventually write books in my life. I knew it. I mean, this was just part of my dharma. But I was like, choose wisely. Write about what you are an expert at, like for real, actually, where you feel so solid in your knowledge. And that's how the book came about. And it's been out now for, I guess, just 2 years. And it just makes my heart so happy to have women from Serbia, like from all over the world, being like, there was a secret group literally in Serbia. They're so cute. I love them so much. And they're learning about boundaries. I let one of them, I just gifted her the course. And then I was like, and you can share it with everyone in your village, like whoever, just bring in. I mean, especially a lot of the cultures that are more misogynistic, which there's plenty all over the world. So that lights me up to feel like I'm reaching. And part of why I have a much smaller private practice, very few people, highly visible folks usually, because I'm also an expert at fame and how fame can affect your life. I guess it made sense that I got into that because of what I used to do. But I couldn't reach enough people with a one-on-one practice. You just can't. I mean, there was some point where I was seeing like 50 people a week, but it's still, you're like, I'm not going to get it done this way. But what about the single mom in Dubuque who's a waitress and feels like she's screwed in life? What about her? She's never going to be my client, but she's not screwed in life. Like she can learn to unscrew herself, And I wanted to be able to reach all of those people and all of the people around the world. So that's my driving force, I have to say, remains the same, I think, as it was when I was a child. I just went through that unhealthy period of overhelping and overdoing and being controlling, and all of the ways that disordered boundaries goes wrong in your life. Your intention may be to help, but you're not really helping if you're telling everyone what to do, right? You're helping yourself because them being in pain is making you uncomfortable. So besides that period of time where my own therapy helped me move through that, I feel like this is my dharma, or my purpose in life feels the same, where it's just, how many people can we help? And it's not that I'm the answer. I'm just a damn good GPS to get folks to their own answers. Like I never subscribed or was that interested in this whole guru culture of these self-help people who are like, it's all about me. It's really not, because everyone has their own magic. I don't hold the magic. I'm just holding up the mirror, right? The way that I teach people, I'm holding up the mirror so they can see their own magic and their own value and worth in life. And that changes everything when you start to really feel like, as my mother taught me when I was a little kid, what you think, how you feel, what you want matters. But the key is that it has to matter to you more than what anyone else wants, thinks, or feels. Which, of course, doesn't mean we can't compromise in life. We do. If you're going to have long-term relationships, you're obviously compromising. But I think that we were really taught to self-abandon. We were really taught, especially if you were raised as a woman. I mean, I know men suffer from this too. I have probably 10% of my audience is people who identify as men, but I feel like when I was raised, right, I was really coming up in the 70s and the 80s. We were raised and praised to be self-abandoning codependents, like fact. The more self-sacrificing you are, the more feminine, the better. Where's my happy girl? Turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And that set us up to not just not know about boundaries, but it set us up to think that having boundaries makes us selfish, self-absorbed, mean. So I really felt like in writing this book and sort of taking this on as my first big thing, I was really coming from a deficit, because it isn't just that people don't know. It's that people got corrupted data about it. So there's all this unlearning before we do the learning, you know?
So I'm still mesmerized. So I have to break myself free of the entrancing that you've done with me. Um, uh, what my listeners and I think what readers are looking for are nuggets within books where they think, I never would have thought of it that way ever. And that is relevant to me. That can solve problems that I didn't know I had or that I never solved. And it's doable by me. So could you share a bunch of those that people discover that would cause them to think, I never would have thought of that ever. And that's going to help me.
Excellent. Well, let's start with just my frame around boundaries, what they are, because I think there's a massive amount of confusion about what it even is to have healthy boundaries. So I say that I want you to think about your boundaries as your own personal rules of engagement, letting people know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. So that's one lens. And your boundaries are made up of your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers. So the non-negotiables. And the problem I see with this is that most people don't know really specifically their preferences, desires, limits, or deal breakers. And it's not even enough to just know them. You have to know them and then be able to transparently communicate them with actual words. So therein lies the rub for many people. But I think it's a simple definition rather than feeling overwhelmed by, oh, there's so many things I need to do. I want you to just think about it as your own rules of engagement, and that it's generous to let people know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. So a great place to start for people is, if you don't know, you're like, I have no idea where I need boundaries, help. I would say you're going to do a quick resentment inventory. And this is going to guide you probably to relationships where either boundaries are needed, boundaries are being violated, or some need is going unmet, or you wouldn't be resentful. So that I find that as a quick way, even if people were like, what did I get out of this interview? Walk with that. And that is where you start. Meaning, start thinking about what needs to change in the way that you are interacting with that person. Do you have the power to change it? Sometimes it's a work situation, and the way that you will establish a boundary with a boss will be different than a coworker, than a subordinate, right? Because when there's a power differential, you have to take that into consideration. If the person has the power to fire you, you don't have the freedom to approach them as transparently as you would if it was your partner or your sister, because it's not appropriate and because you probably don't want to lose your job. Now, if someone is egregiously trampling over your boundaries, you might need to think about getting a new job, but this is just a consideration. So once you do your resentment inventory, you write down who the person is, what is the situation, what is your feeling? So resentful is sort of a big umbrella. How are you really feeling? Are you feeling underappreciated? Is someone stealing your ideas at work? Are you feeling underappreciated at home? Are you feeling wrongly accused of something? Like, what is happening? Because this is how we're going to figure out what boundary conversation needs to happen. So that's one thought. Another thought is for people who have difficulty saying no. That I know that there is a lot of people who feel pressure when a friend asks you to do something, or you feel pressured to say yes. Many of us were trained that good people, help others. I mean, I was taught to be of service, but not to be a doormat. You know what I mean? Because they're different things. So I think you have to look at, are you an insta yes person? Now, if you are, you will not naturally take to becoming an insta no person, right? So that's too much of a leap, and we wouldn't want you to, because either one of those things is automatic behavior, right? If you are instantaneously agreeing to something, you're not giving yourself time to think, to imagine, to really go, do I have the bandwidth to help that person? You're not even thinking. So the first thing we do for the people who feel compelled to give an immediate yes is we're going to buy time. And you can buy time very simply. And if you want to do it as an experiment, everybody listening, take the next 7 days. If you identify with being sort of a yes, people pleaser, 7 days, you're not going to immediately agree to anything. You're going to say, oh my gosh, Bob, thank you so much for thinking of me. I'll let you know tomorrow. I need to check with my partner. Someone asks you to do work at work. They want you to take, this is the person who's always sloughing their work off on you. You can say, oh, Betty, I actually need to look at what's on my plate right now before I can tell if I actually have the bandwidth to do a good job on that. So I will get back to you tomorrow. So when we give a maybe, it is so much easier to come back and give a thoughtful no, that you can't do it. And you've already now set the stage. You're teeing it up that no is a possibility. And you can also say, I gave this to my clients many years ago, where I would just say, I have a 24-hour decision-making policy. I'll let you know tomorrow. Or I have a 48-hour for my sanity. I'll give myself 48 hours to decide. And I feel like some people feel like they don't even have a right to think about it. We're so worried about offending others. And we barely stop to think about other people's offensive behavior or other people's entitled expectations. And you can do all of this lovingly, you guys. Like, one of the biggest myths about boundaries is that you got to be like a hardliner. You got to be mean. You're bawling people out and punching people in the nose verbally. No. And if you're doing that, you're not a boundary boss. You're someone who has rigid boundaries, right? Because your boundaries can be too rigid, which are too firm. And those are people that you're kind of like my way or the highway. People who would rather ghost you and not get back to you than tell you hurt their feelings. That's having rigid boundaries. The porous boundaries are more like the peacekeeper, the pushover, right? The chameleon. And there's actually archetypes. I have a quiz if people want to take it. It's only 13 questions. It's called, you just go to boundaryquiz.com. It's free. And there's 7 archetypes. So you can see, where are your boundaries disordered? Are you more of like the ice queen? Are you more of the peacekeeper? And I find a lot of people feel very identified with the, I just don't want any conflict. The archetypes that are like, I just don't want any problems with people. But when we do that too much, what we're doing is self-abandoning. So with the no, let's just go back to, you bought time because you're not saying yes immediately to anything. When it's time to go back, let's say it's someone you care about and you really like them, but you really don't want to go to the thing that they want you to go to. You can always start with love, with kindness, with sweetness. You can say, I love that you always think of me, and yet I'm not available on Wednesday night because I have an early thing on Thursday. Now, we don't need to give an excuse, but I want to make a really important distinction between providing context to people who you care about, you love, you want them to understand you more. That is why we would provide context. So my friend has something important that she would like me to go to. I can't go to it because I have an early meeting and I'm presenting. I want her to know, if I didn't have that early meeting, I would go, but I have to prioritize that. So I tell her not to convince her that I have the right to have a boundary, because I'm positive I do, but because I love her. And I want her to know that if I didn't have this other important thing, I would do it. So context and convincing, I think that these two things get mixed up a lot when it comes to feeling like we have to justify our boundary. We have to write a dissertation on why we're saying no, but you don't. And that's your insecurity. So the way that I teach it in the book and in my courses is that we always have to go in first before we can go out. You have your own, I have my own downloaded boundary blueprint of why we relate to boundaries the way that we do. Family of origin, country, culture. There's so many things that come together. Lived experience, what we saw, modeled behavior, all of these things come together and they create this paradigm in the unconscious mind that makes us go, oh, this is what you do. This is life. This is relationships. This is what boundaries are or are not. And if you're a part of this family, we do this, because many families are very enmeshed. So having boundaries is like a assault on everyone, where if you're the scapegoat and you're the one who's actually doing it, they're like, we're excommunicating you from the tribe because you have the nerve to want to be different than us. So we all have very good reasons for however our boundaries are disordered. It didn't just happen like that. It happened for a reason. So part of what I walk you through in the beginning of the book is you uncovering your own blueprint. So then you can consciously decide, do I subscribe to that? Do I believe that's the only way to be a good woman, is to give anybody the shirt off my friggin' back? Like, do I subscribe to that? I hope the answer is no. But it's a choice that you will make for yourself. And when these things go unexamined, when we don't go into the basement in the unconscious, when we don't look at these things, they just become your life. You're just like, this is the way it is. And so there's so much hope. If you feel right now, everybody listening, if you're struggling with boundaries, I don't want you to feel bad, because you wouldn't feel bad if you weren't fluent in a language that nobody taught you. You wouldn't think there was a deficit in you or something was wrong with you. You would go, oh, I need a teacher. I need language lessons. I need to learn. This is exactly the same thing. And you have to want to learn. And then you have to do something different. But in the book, I walk you through every step of the way. You're not alone in doing it. It's small, it's baby steps that make these changes. And what I always find interesting is that when people realize, like, wow, I really need to change the boundary dances in my life with my family of origin, with my partner, with everyone, they're like, okay, so should I tell them that it's going to, like, they can't wait to announce, like with the bullhorn, like there's a new boundary sheriff in town and everything is going to change. And I'm like, that's your anxiety that makes you want to warn. We're not warning anybody. We're just going to slowly but surely start doing different dance steps. We're going to start changing the way that we interact with the people in our lives. And again, you can do this lovingly. So back to I'm going to finish up the buying time to say no. When you have to come back to the person, and if it is a no, right, you can start, as I said, with sweetness. And you have to accept the fact that sometimes people will be disappointed. And it will not kill you. And it will not destroy your relationships. And if it does, if you asserting a boundary blows up a relationship, oh, that relationship was built on your self-abandonment. You got to, let it blow up. It's sad. It'll be painful, but there has to be room for you to assert yourself if it's really a relationship that's worth having, you know?
I I would sense that people who work with you might think you are so mature and grown up and have it all together. I mean, it's like listening to Lego blocks that are no, and it's a compliment. It is seamless. As you're describing it, I can see the steps, how they connect. I've never thought of boundaries that way. I had kind of a more naive or simplistic view. Oh, I need better boundaries. Oh, people walk all over me. I better set boundaries. And you've just given a master class to my listeners and to me. And do you ever run into that? It just seems the distance between people who aren't don't understand this and what you understand. It seems like it could be a huge gap because you're so calm. I can see that in almost any situation, you can come up with a calm, clear, fair, non-provocative, non-manipulative way to approach it. You're quite remarkable.
Oh, you're sweet. But I wasn't always like this though, Mark. And I still struggle with, here's the thing with your nature, right? If your nature, I'm a lover, right? I love people. I'm still a highly sensitive person. I'm an empath. Now I have better internal boundaries, meaning I'm not picking up you know what I mean? I was afraid to become a therapist. I was afraid I was going to have clients sleeping on my couch. Like my boundaries were terrible. I didn't, but that was one of my fears is, will I have good enough boundaries to be a good therapist? I was scared. And I'm a person, I am not someone, if you don't love confrontation, just because you become masterful at boundaries, you may never love it. I don't love it. I don't love having conflict with my husband or my sisters or anybody, but I do it. And this is the difference. And do I do it better now? Because I've written a book on it, because I've literally, I am a boundary boss. I mean, I learned so much writing the book about myself. And it's so interesting. There were different parallel processes going on that were shining a light on my deficiencies, right? In the process, like I'm a first-time author. This is a big publishing company. This, they know, but then I knew they were wanting me to make changes to the book. And I was like, no way. No, that's not how people learn. I'm telling you, they're like, well, we don't think you should do blah, blah, blah. We rewrote it the way they thought. And I was like, no, this is not, like, so much more work than it needed to be, but I got it back to the way I wanted it to, where I needed it to be so people could learn. Same thing with the cover of the book. They kept sending me things that were terrible. And I was like, that's not, and I worked overtime. I didn't want to offend the people in the art department. And then I just was like, we're coming down to it. I have a designer who's been working for me for years. And I was like, Wayne, do 4 covers. We're picking one of those and I will deal with the fallout. And we did. And they dealt with it because I was like, you guys, you put out all these books. This book is going to be attached to me for the rest of my life. Like, and so my point of sharing any of that is that, did I do those things seamlessly and perfectly? No. Was I mad? Was I crying at different points? Was I pissed off? Was I feeling like a victim? Was I wanting to bawl people out? Yes, yes, yes. But the difference is that you can still have those feelings and not have them drive your behavior. Like, there's something about, and I think a lot of this has to do with meditation as well, that I've been a meditation teacher for many years, and I've been meditating for 2 decades. And one of the biggest changes in my life when I started a dedicated practice was I gained about 2 to 3 seconds of response time. And I was such a hothead. Like, I was not this calm. I was someone, I had a short fuse. I would send a pissed off email. I would never do that today because it's so not smart, right? If there's nothing wrong with being angry and eloquently sharing what you're angry about, but I would react. I wouldn't wait. And once I got my meditation practice going from working with Deepak and a bunch of other people, I had a choice. I was like, you know what? I'm going to put that in draft. And if I'm still this pissed off tomorrow, I will rewrite it less reactively and I will send it. And most of the time I wasn't. I was like, let's look at your 50%. Why? Get radically curious about why this struck you that way. Do you really think that was their intention? Why are you letting it get to you? What does it remind you of? Like, I would just therapize myself to get to sort of the answers of, like, what is that really about? But so this whole process of really becoming a boundary boss, it is exactly that. So my feeling is every win is a win. Every moment that you assert yourself in your life honestly is a win. And I really want to make this last point, Mark, before I know we got to go soon, but it's not about, your boundaries are not a lever of control to get other people to do what you want. Asserting your boundaries, telling the truth about how you feel, that's where your healing lies. It's really not in what they do. In what they do or don't do, they're sharing data with you about what they're capable of, about what they're willing to do, maybe. But you will be changed from having the courage to assert yourself. When you live your life, your lived experience says what I think, how I feel, what I want matters. That changes you. It changes your value. And when you start talking true, as I call it, you won't be able to stop at some point. And you'll always be able to do it with love and kindness if that's your choice, or a little more heat if it's like Bob from accounting who's being inappropriate. Whoever the person is, you will have the choice. But not how good it feels to be accurately seen, known, and heard is worth every second of discomfort. It's worth every hour you put in learning to become a boundary boss. And it's the only way that you can ever actually, I believe, make your truest unique mark on the world. Because if you're living small and keeping yourself small to not threaten other people, if you're saying yes when you want to say no under the guise of being nice, it's all self-abandonment. And is it really nice? It's really not. Speaking of corrupted data, when we say yes, when we want to say no, when we don't tell someone we're upset with them, we're giving the people in our life corrupted data about us, about who we actually are. Because remember I said that your boundaries are made up of your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers. You know what those things also make up? You. These are the things that make you who you actually are as a human being. So it's so important. And I think we've been talked out of our preferences, especially women, where we want to be like, you know me, I'm easy breezy, no fuss, no muss, like whatever you guys want to do. And for some people that might be true, but I feel like it's a learned behavior for a lot of people. And what's wrong with saying, I feel like having pizza? Or what's wrong with saying, I really don't want to go to that place because it's too loud? You're letting people know who you are by sharing your preferences. It doesn't mean we always get our way, but it's always worth sharing, is what I think.
I'm astounded. This was wonderful. This was I'm speechless, and I guess that can go along with just listen, but a lot of times I talk too much on this podcast, but I am speechless, and I don't quite know what to say. So how can people find out more about you? Because um, I'm going to be personally sharing this. I'll send you the video, but I'm going to send the video to a bunch of people and say, you need to watch this and listen to it in entirety. So where can people find out more about you? And
you can go to, terricole.com is probably the easiest place. I spend lots of time on Instagram. I go live, I do lots of stuff. So, and I'm just at Terri Cole. I also have a podcast that I've had for 8 years called The Terri Cole Show. It's easy to find. You can take the quiz. If you guys want to find out your archetype, go to boundaryquiz.com. It's free. And I'd be curious to see, Mark, I want you to take it. I want to see what you end up with. I'm going to guess, but I'm not going to tell you what the guess is.
no, I've learned a lot. I'll tell you, I'm very nubile compared to what you know about this. I'm also kind of an empath, and for years, I didn't feel like I had the right to be judgmental about other people, and and then I discovered the word discerning, and it freed me because I grew up with fairly judgmental parents, quite judgmental parents, and so I think I grew up deciding, oh, you can't be judgmental, because I knew the pain of what it was like to be judged all the time and evaluated. And as a result, I could be taken advantage of pretty easily. And so I'm discovering my boundaries, but part of that is I hope it's not too little too late. I mean, I've retired from active practice. I do coaching and whatnot, but you're so clear, it's painful. And I mean that in the most complimentary way. So, so if you're listening in, you need to listen to this episode at least twice, because you're probably jumping to conclusions about the word boundaries, and you're probably getting it wrong. You're probably reacting to it from misinformation, and Terri is misinformation.
You're clever.
Well, yeah, you're quite remarkable. So thank you for being on, and to our listeners, thank you for listening in. I really do think that what she has will change your life, because I can feel something shifting inside me, ways of being differently, how to respectfully say no. And it's also a matter of respecting yourself to say no. I heard a saying that if you need to be liked, if you sacrifice being respected in order to be liked, you won't be either.
Right.
By either person.
Right. It's so true.
So thank you very much, and I hope we will stay in touch. And
yes.
Take care. And to our listeners, you take care too. And when wake up calls come your way, why don't you ask yourself, is there some boundary violation going on in this wake up call of mine? And you'll be the better for it. So thanks again. And please leave Please leave reviews at Apple Podcasts so we can do an even better job. And thank you for supporting it. So everyone, do take care.